Howdy peeps, hope you're doing well. It has been a while since the last video. This time it has. I'll say that because I was chatting with one of my buddies and it was pointed out that I released 2 videos, one after the other, in which the intros were, it's been a while since I've done a video. And as I explained, it's like I do them throughout the week. Sometimes I'll upload them, sometimes I won't. And I usually aim for like 1 upload a week, right? So I don't want to overdo it, right? Believe me, there's plenty of takes and retakes that get done in amongst all that. But anyway, yeah, so I suppose the jingle is howdy peeps, it's been a while since I've done a video. Anyway, in this one I wanted to talk about a couple of things, maybe a few things. We'll start with a couple and see how it pans out. Obviously I did a video a little while ago regarding closure, and of recent I've watched another content creator also in the manosphere, and he was talking about closure and not understanding what sort of closure is needed. Like, if a relationship's done, then it's done, right? And it's interesting because he says he's been involved with chicks that have either got borderline or narcissistic personality disorders. Which, I mean, you learn really quick from these situations, right? And I guess in some cases it is probably, well, in all cases it is subjective to the individual and how they perceive the situation. But the not understanding closure, well, when it comes to personalities like that, you see, you tend to get the usual spiel, you know, the idolization, getting put up on a pedestal. You know, this is what happens to you as a guy. You get, you know, you're the next best thing since sliced bread, that sort of thing, right? And with that, depending on how emotionally invested that guy is at the time, is going to have a knock-on effect over a period of time. You know, as they call it, the honeymoon phase of any relationship. You know, stuff very rarely goes wrong because both parties are putting on their best fronts, right? They're treading on their own eggshells, as it were, right? Until such a point where they become comfortable with one another, and then you could call it the mask slips, or they just fall back into the pattern or habits that they had prior, for better or for worse, right? And that's just it. It's when you're caught up in that honeymoon phase, and I suppose I'm trying to think of this from a narcissistic relationship that wasn't short term. You see, I've been in very short term narcissistic relationships after my own personal experiences. You tolerate it a lot less, you know. Downside is you can sometimes end up looking for red flags where there are none, right? That is a admittable downside to it. But if you're an emotional enough of a guy, and say it was over like, you got to remember, the longer you're invested into air quotes toxic relationship, the more you get sucked into it, right? And you live in what the lifestyle that they are projecting you to think that you're living, as in the relationship you have with them, and also your own personal projected fantasy of the other person, So if you get really caught up in that emotionally, that's not going to do much good over a long period of time. Now, so with like the whole personality disorder thing, oftentimes they're either like a roller coaster. They can be really volatile. You know, one minute it's like smooth sailing, the next minute it's like a bad day in Bosnia. You know, it's not it's not happy times. It really isn't. And you know, it's not necessarily always two extremes either. It's not like on one end of the spectrum to the other. You usually get like the bickering in between, which is usually a build up, but that's going more into it. That's if you actually get the air quotes luxury, right? If you get the luxury of having a situation like that occur, and say you have a wake up call in that moment, and you finally see that person for who they really are. They are, you know, their true self, in even if they're in a crappy mood because something happened that they didn't agree with or something, right? They, you know, they're going to have the ump as well, right? And then this is just it. When if you think of where anger comes from a place of fear, a fear of lack of control, something that they couldn't do or achieve or have or whatever the case was, right? So then they've got that. And so what do people do when they act out of, air quotes, fear? They react in anger. And that's when we all start making stupid mistakes. You know, we send the wrong text message, we say the wrong thing, or, you know, I mean, text messages are the worst anyway, man. So I never try and resolve an argument via text, because what's written can be taken out of context. And if you're not like eloquent, and I mean eloquent, with the English language, you know, the person on the other end can misinterpret something really easy, and something that might have been really minor could escalate into something quite huge. I'm just saying. So, but this is just it. The point being is it comes from a place of anger, and even though their own emotions a lot of the time, or albeit really, you know, self-centered at the end of the day, this is just their mindset. This isn't me trying to be funny towards them. You know, it's like they are the centre of their own universe, and they expect everyone else around them to drop whatever and attend to them because reasons. It's like, no, that's you could argue for a bit of sort of like princess syndrome going on, and it kind of is, right? If you think how the potential for how narcissistic a Disney princess could be, given their upbringing, privileged upbringing and all that shit, right? Just saying. But digressing back onto the whole closure thing, you see, if you've been in that situation where you are trying to build for future, you are being projected a fantasy from the other person, you're seeing it from your own personal fantasy perspective, you know, this happy life, happy wife, all of this, right? Kids, maybe, if it's a thing. But you're trying to build up for the future, then out of nowhere, it's just like, bam, done. Like, there's you can't get hold of them, there's no contact, they're not talking to you, they've got the arse with you all the time if they are talking to you, and it's like, it's the not knowing what you've done. And a lot of guys don't get this. It's like, you didn't do anything, right? That is the way that person is, and they're never going to change. You know, the same thing is to happen to you is going to happen to the next guy, it's going to happen to the next guy. It's just a cycle that a lot of the time they can't break out of, because half the time they don't see there's a problem there in the first place. But it's like, well, you know, obviously there is. obviously. But to get that closure that I think guys refer to is that, you know, it's not necessarily like some sort of ceremony. And again, some people, that is a thing. Some people do that, right? But it's not necessarily a ceremony as such. It's just a way of perhaps like mourning or grieving the end of the relationship, which in most cases from a guy's point of view is a complete waste of time, because probably 7 times out of 10, I think that's being generous, I'd say 7 times, maybe 8 times out of 10 potentially, fuck it, we'll go with 7.5. Alright, so 7.5 times out of 10 you know, the chick's already been considering leaving anyway, right? So that's why they, you know, it's not that they find it easy. Well, I suppose they do find it easy, depending on the individual, right? Because if you think about it, if you're in a relationship and you're clocking points on what your partner does to things that piss you off, and, you know, then something else or someone else becomes available that might potentially be a better option than the person that they're with at the time, you know, all they really have to do is show a little bit of interest in one. And I'm not saying that they all do this, I'm saying that it happens, right? Yeah, let's be real, right? Let's be honest about this conversation. So they'll show a bit of interest in this other third party that's come along, whilst at the same time be collecting points for potentially having a nag, or maybe having an argument to see how you react. And look, sometimes it's to see how you react. Sometimes I think it's a bit of a tester to see if you'll actually end it, because they're being so, like, perhaps childish or unreasonable or unrational or something like that. And I think sometimes they do it specifically so that you will end a relationship, which sets them free to then go on to be with a third party with a clear conscience. I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. It's like, you know what I mean, starting an argument with someone to go off with someone else, you know, because you didn't actually want to end a relationship yourself, because they, in this case the chick, didn't want to look bad in the eyes of the masses, right? By ending one relationship, then going off with someone else straight away. It just looks bad, doesn't it? And as we know, women don't deal with shame very well. You know, it's just a thing. It's just a thing. You know, that's when things get ever so personal, isn't it? You know, and who the fuck needs that in their life? I'm just saying, you know. But that's just it. And I think it's for the guys that want that closure. It's like, understand this. It's as heartbreaking as it may sound. It's like, well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the whole relationship was a farce, really. You know, because if both of you were putting on your best selves for the times you were spending together in order to be attracted to one another, right? Well, you're not being totally honest with them, because who is their best self 24/7? Fucking no one. That's the thing. You know, we are who we are. Then, like I said earlier, like the old habits or patterns start coming back from the past, because, you know, this is how they've lived, whichever way that is. And then all of a sudden, once, you know, and again, if there's a lot happened, if that happened over like a 6 month to a year period, and in that time they'd actually moved in together, and then they'd become a bit more relaxed with who they are as people and how they live their life and what hobbies they have, and, you know, what they do each night of the week, and does it bother the other person and all. Then this is just it. That's when you start having a problem, because they weren't quite, not that they weren't necessarily upfront, but they certainly didn't point out the obvious. You know, like, oh, well, I like to go out every Tuesday, Friday and Saturday night, for argument's sake, right? Say that's the guy. she might not be too happy about that, you know, because she's thinking, hey buddy, your drinking and clubbing days are over, buddy. You know, you need to be at home with me. In the meanwhile, he's still thinking, I've been at work, want to do this, want to do that. See whoever down at the local boozer. But yeah. And then, of course, with that can start, you know, unless there's a compromise, and again, this is the other sort of thing, but yeah, you know what, I don't think I'm actually going to touch on the other topics. I'm just going to leave this one as it is, because it's to do with closure, and it's to do with sort of like relationships and understanding people. And this is just it. It's like, if people can't be honest with each other from the get-go, then the relationship itself hasn't got a great deal of hope. You know, and unfortunately, being honest, something like in today's day and age, it's almost heresy. it's crazy, some crazy shit. You know, I mean, I've noticed out and about the amount of people, like, I mean, I don't know if the term is habitual or if it is actually pathological. I'm starting to think it's pathological, and the term I'm looking for is pathological liars. It's like literally anything and everything, man. It's like, come off it. And this is just in everyday life. It's like, this is not even getting involved in dating and, you know, meeting someone new, right? That itself comes with all its, you know, trials and tribulations, but that's a different thing. But this is, you know, with closure, I think for a lot of guys it's just like, it is to do with that mourning period. And the way I looked at it, it's like, well, when I was in this scenario, it's like, well, even though I had these feelings towards this person, right? For starters, that was never reciprocal, right? And initially it did seem to be the case, but like I said, it's just a mirror image of what you do. They also may not know how to love, as it were. if you could believe they're capable of such, they understand what it is, they know what it's about. I just don't think they've quite nailed the honesty, loyalty, you know, respect, all of that, you know, especially when it comes to respecting boundaries, right? I think these are things that they've never actually quite mastered. And it's like, do you want to live with that anyway? Do you know what I mean? It's like forever walking on eggshells, like, no, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing for anyone. But the easiest way to have that closure is just like, the person you thought they were never existed, man. It was just a combination of a projected fantasy of who you wanted them to be, combined with the fantasy that they were projecting of who they thought you wanted to see. But, so yeah, that person never existed. So imagine that. it's a really quite a cruel thing to do, to be honest. So, silly phone.
To Be Honest by Young Dolph, now playing on Spotify.
No, you're not. What the fuck was that about? I've got to get the name of this. To Be Honest by Young Dolph. Well, I have no idea who the fuck Young Dolph is. I'm promoting this guy. It best be good. I hope it's good. I'll have a listen in a bit. I'll leave my own comments in the comment section. But yeah, that's just it. Like, the whole time, even if it was a short period, then brilliant, you know. But obviously, if it's like anything over a year, you know, that's I think that's when it starts to sting a little bit more, and closure does become easier, I find, with experience. not that experiencing these things is a good thing. And then it's like, oh, well, guys are so emotionally unavailable. It's like, can you not see what you're doing to us? It's like you're literally doing this to us, right? Literally. And you're saying about emotional unavailable. Yeah, all right. Anyway, look, I'll wrap this one up. So, and I'm going to go and listen to that tune in a minute. So, thank you all for listening. Thoughts, comments, and opinions. Feel free to jump down as always. And until the next one, stay cool, stay free. Peace out.